welcome to Romera Records Virtual Cast. Today we have on Freeman. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
It's going great. I found you from Podmatch and basically saw what you're doing with people's lives. So I just wanted you to come on and talk about what you do and let everybody know how you're helping people out.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, yeah. So currently a financial planner. I started my own firm a few years ago, and I think so. There's a lot of people that get into this industry, and I came into it the way a lot of people do, where, and I think there's a lot of industries out there where people get into it to help people, right? So that's how a lot of people get into financial advising. They realize the power of knowing what you're doing with finances, and they want to help people get there. 'Cause I don't know about you, like, did you ever have any personal finance classes that were required in high school or college or any education along the way?
So I'm a business management major. So yeah, I did like some
Sure.
accounting and stuff like that, and a finance class. But other than that, no. In high school, nothing. So
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So like, and so right, I'm a business management major too, and so like we'll do that in business, right? If you have a finance degree, you obviously have some of those kind of things. But for most, at most colleges and most high schools, it's not required anywhere along the line. So a lot of people just don't know what they're doing, right? And there's a lot, it can get complicated out there. So a lot of people get into it wanting to help people with that. They learn the power of it. They want to help people. But there's not a lot of good ways into the industry, unfortunately. And so I joined the way a lot of people do, where I joined a company that I thought was this independent financial planning firm, but it turns out was owned by an insurance company. And so what they do then is they say, hey, you can give advice on whatever you want as long as you sell enough of our insurance products.
hmm.
And so they kind of, they have quotas for you. A lot of companies operate this way, and insurance can fit for some people. Some people need it, some people don't. But I just kind of that at my firm anyways, they would kind of push you to be selling this stuff no matter what, right? Even if it wasn't a good fit, whole life insurance, permanent insurance, other types of, annuities, these types of financial products. Um, and it's incentivizing for a lot of people to do it because you get paid a big commission when you do. And if you're just, if you're charging people to do investments, you don't get paid very much. But if you sell a big insurance product, then you get paid a bunch. And so I just found this kind of conflict of interest there. And I'm not against sales. I'm not against commissions or any of those kind of things, right? But the way I kind of think about it is, if you went into a Toyota dealer to get it because you wanted a Toyota, right? And they asked you some questions about what you want, all those things. Like you wouldn't expect someone who worked for Toyota to say, you know what would really be good for you would be a Honda. You should go across the street and get a Honda instead, right? Like they work for Toyota. You know that if you buy a vehicle from them, the sales rep is probably getting a commission, like right? And so that doesn't bother anybody to do that kind of stuff. But I think if you went into this, let's say you went to a different auto sales place and they held themselves out as, hey, we are an independent auto sales company. And so we're going to ask you some questions and we're going to find the best car for you in your situation, regardless of the brand, make, model, all those things. And we're going to ask you questions, show you some things and make sure you get in the right car. But then on the backside, they were being paid extra by Toyota to always recommend Toyotas. That would be different, right? That's where it's like, that's where there's a conflict, right? And so that's the same way where I don't mind commissions in basically any other industry, but I think what most people when they hire a financial advisor, financial planner, they want independent help, right? They want just, hey, what's good for me? What do I need to be doing? But there's a lot of companies like the one I started with where on the backside then they're incentivizing these advisors to sell a certain type of product or sell a certain brand of product and those kind of things. And that's why I just kind of felt like this isn't right, right? This isn't what I signed up for. And so because of that, we ended up uh, launching our own company. And so that way we could do, if you can't find the way you want to do things, then just go start one yourself. Is kind of what I landed on. So we launched Lacrosse Financial Planning. I'm in Lacrosse, Wisconsin. So we just named it after our city in case people were looking at, hey, financial advising in Lacrosse. Hopefully, we'd show up on Google. And we launched that a few years ago, and I think one of the things that we hear over and over again from most people is, "Wow, this is exactly what I was looking for." And so to me, it's a testament to I think that there's good and bad ways to I think do any kind of business, but if you're doing things the right way, that people will come, and that there's always going to be some success when you do those things just the right way.
Yeah, I think most people start a business because they found a need that didn't exist, or they found
Yep.
something that was a niche service or product that they didn't see enough of, so they were like, "Oh, I'm gonna just do it myself." And that is definitely a way to build a community around what you're doing, because that's you felt like you had a passion or a want for that thing. So now you're trying to build a community or a consumer base around that thing. So yeah, like what you're doing is something that you were like, hey, this is what's needed. This is what a problem that I feel like I can solve. So that's what you geared it toward. But I want to go back to when you were talking about just everything from finances of how people manage their money and things like that. Is there some things that you can see a habit of people who are your clients or people that you just regularly see that they continuously do?
Yeah, I think like there's a number of things that we can be doing. I've always found that there's kind of maybe two separate categories of finance. Some are the things that we need to be actively doing, right? There'd be things like saving more money, doing a budget, not going into debt. So like a lot of behavioral things that you need to be actively doing. And then there's other parts of it that are kind of going on behind the scenes, no matter what. And so one of the things that we kind of try to focus on both with financial planning, but one of the things that I often see is that there's a lot of people, right, that think that they're not ready for financial planning. They're not ready to meet with someone because they don't feel like I should start budgeting before I do that, or I should start. It's kind of like I should get fit before I go to the gym, kind of
Mm,
thing, which is obviously absurd. 'Cause that's why you would go there, is to get fit in the first place. But we've always found that even if you feel like you're at a place where you can't save as much money as you want to, maybe you're paying down some debt, or you're in a season of life with young kids or whatever else, there's still things that are happening in the background that could probably be better, right? And so, for example, again, it's no one's fault, right? We do these things because we're never taught any other way. But most people who they work for a company that provides a 401k, for example, right? And they're putting some money in there, and their employer is putting some money in there. And unless they actively went in and shows the investments that are in there, they are automatically put into a default option. And that default option is pretty mediocre overall, right? And so again, you might not feel like you can save enough extra to do other things or hire an advisor or those kind of things, but in the background, you're putting money into your 401k, and so is your employer, and that's not doing as well as it could be. And there's a big difference between just getting a little bit of advice, even if it's not full on financial planning, even if it isn't like going, all in, there's still some great benefit to understanding at least just a few things on the beginning that can set you on the right course for the long term, right? Because just making a few tweaks to the way your 401k is invested, if you're in your 30s, you got 30 plus years to go before you retire. There's a big change down the road getting that set up correctly on the front end than waiting until you get to the back end and being like, oh man, I wish someone had told me in your 30s. Because that's what I also hear a lot, right? People come in and they're 55, 60, and you walk through all this stuff and they're like, oh man, I wish someone had told me this 30 years ago. And so, if you're in that stage where you don't feel like you can really commit to financial planning, or you really can really do a lot, there's still just a few things like that you should learn on the front end, because it's going to make a world of difference on the back end.
yeah, and something that you were talking about really resonates with me is just being able to have that knowledge at a younger age and just be present of what's going on. Because a lot of times I would think, so I'm 31, and I think that
Sure.
people my age and younger, uh, we've grown up in a society of have it now. Like we've
Yeah.
got Uber and all these other things that are services that are geared toward like, this is what I want, give it to me, and all I have to
Yep.
do is look at my phone and I can get it. And when people have that kind of mindset, it's hard for them to save money. It's hard for them to take their finances and be like, oh, if I just put this aside, I can have more of it 30 years from now. It's like, I am 31, so that's just double my age. It's like starting my
Yep.
whole life all
Yep.
over. And so it's kind of a weird thought process, and it's hard for some people to grasp that concept.
Yep. And that's where again, that's on the automatic on the back end side, right? Getting your 401k set up correctly can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars more by the time you're 60 than just running on autopilot on default the entire time. On the other side, on like the what we actually do side, then like, I think some people, they shy away from finance because they feel like they need to know everything to be better at it. And everyone's got their own major, their own passions, their own career, and it's hard enough keeping up on all the things we need to do for our own careers, our own family, and all that. Let alone feel like we need to become an expert in finance. But it's really less about that, and there it does boil down to a lot of these simple decisions or simple behaviors that we can do that again multiply a lot out over the long run, right? So to that point, right? Because I'm also 30, what am I? I'm 32, right? So same age. Um, you know, for those of us who don't feel again like we can save a lot, or you're right, we're kind of in that I want now mentality. If I put money in my 401k, then I have less now to spend on myself. You know, the nice thing is like there's things you can do where you only need to make one good decision one time, and then that will automatically make a whole bunch of really good decisions for you
Mm.
down the road. So you can set up most 401ks, for example, right now we'll have it where you can put a certain amount in, and then it has an auto escalation feature, which is where it'll automatically increase for you every year, right? So maybe you start with 5%, and that's all you feel like you can do right now. But then on the next year, it's going to automatically go to 6%, and then to 7, and then to 8. And the nice thing about that is most of us get a raise at some point throughout the year, and it's usually more than 1%. So if
Hmm.
you're getting a 3 or 5% raise, and then you're kicking just 1% extra into your 401k, you still feel the raise. That still feels good. You still get more money coming home, but you also get more money going into your 401k over your lifetime, which again is going to result in tons of stuff. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And you only need to make that good decision, right? You don't have to remember to go back in and increase your contribution. You only need to one time go in, set that up, adjust the way your 401k is invested, and then it's all automatic, right? And you can save and develop a lot of wealth completely automatically without having to constantly go in and touch and fiddle with things. And I think that's the part that scares people away. But just knowing those few nuggets and then actually going and doing them, right? If anyone else is hearing this and like, oh, that sounds like a good idea, means nothing if we don't actually go in and do it, right? And set it up and explore some of those options. And so that's a lot of my job ends up being just one, showing people what you need to do, and then two, just getting them to do it, right? Just being that accountability, that extra person that's going to push you, that's not going to let you forget, and that helps people to build that patience and discipline that's needed for long-term wealth building.
Yeah, so I actually have a full-time job where I work at Owens Corning as like a
Oh yeah,
automation engineer, and
yep,
so the my job is non-union, but the employees who run the floor, like all the operators, they're like in a union, and them and the other mechanics that work there,
yep,
and so every year they get this raise. Well, and but they also have to like talk to the union like every few years or whatever.
yep,
So they give them this option. It's they get a bonus or they can get like a percentage raise, and it's like 3% or something like that.
mm-hmm.
The operators, not the mechanics, not the people in maintenance, the operator people always choose the bonus, and they don't understand. The mechanics get so frustrated.
Ugh.
Like, hey, we're all in the same union. Give us
Yeah,
the percentage. Don't take the bonus. And they're like,
yeah,
nah, we'll take the bonus. And it's like,
yeah. I
oh
want all the
my
money right
God.
now. Yeah, yeah, and that's part of it. Is like, and there's just this mindset around that's got to be that's a huge portion. So we talk about this a lot, um, where why are some people really successful and other people are not from like the same backgrounds, right? It's easy to find people from different backgrounds and be like, oh, this guy's super successful because he was born into a millionaire family and blah, blah, all this stuff, right? And we can do that. And that's an easy way to make excuses for why we're not successful. But you can always find people, right, with the exact same backgrounds, some who have done really well with it and others who have not. And I don't think that I don't think knowledge is the problem because there's tons of really good information out there. Most of it's free, right?
Yeah.
There's tons of books you can listen to for free from the library, tons of great podcasts like this one, tons of YouTube videos that are educational. I feel like there's knowledge is not the problem. If knowledge were the problem, we'd all be, or if knowledge were enough, we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs, right? We know how to do these things. Um, and so there's action, right? There's actually doing the things we need to do. There's choosing the raise instead of the bonus because a raise is permanent and then continues to compound, right? If you get a 3% raise, the next 3% raise is 3% of the 103% you had before. And so it keeps getting better and better, right? But then I think there's this missing gap in the middle there that we call belief. So there's knowledge, there's action, and then there's belief. So there's just knowing something like, here's a fact, right? So for example, you should invest in equities or stocks, not in bonds if you're younger than age 55. You should be 100% stocks with no bonds at all in your 401k, Roth IRAs, all that. Okay, now you know that, right? But that's not gonna inspire a bunch of readers to go out and be like, oh, I'm gonna go change. Like there's not enough there. So you have the knowledge, but that's not enough to inspire that action. And I think that's where that belief, like, do you actually believe that that's true for you and can help your life and all those things? And so if you have a belief that money is more important right now, and that going out to eat or getting some new kicks or driving a nicer car is the most important thing you can do with your money right now, you're always going to choose the bonus, right? You're always going to choose the take home pay. You're always going to choose. But if you believe that, hey, I can truly build wealth, I can, become financially independent. I can still enjoy life. I'll just put in a small portion aside that I won't actually notice, because eating out one less time each month, you're not going to actually notice that. But you need to have that belief, and that's where I think you can cultivate that by listening to good content over and over again. By watching less videos about cars and how much money you can spend on cars to make them better, and more about personal development and reading books and working out and financial success, and less videos on how to spend more money on makeup and beauty products, and more on how to increase your skills in the marketplace and those kind of things. And by building those beliefs and reinforcing those, that I think is what keeps us acting. That's why I'm a huge podcast listener. I love podcasts like this that are focused on personal development, on meeting people who are doing it right, and encourage, because I think it all just helps us with that mindset, pushing towards the things that we ultimately want more, not just the things we want right now.
And you kind of alluded to this earlier, but are there some myths that you constantly see people believing, or just anything like online that you constantly see people telling other people, like, oh, do this and that'll make you rich? Like, any myths that you usually see?
I think one of the big ones is that investing in the stock market is risky.
Mm.
You see that a lot, and if you watch things, you will notice, you'll see a huge uptick in commercials and videos and content made promoting gold or real estate or life insurance or annuities or those kinds of things when the stock market is down. So
Mm.
whenever it goes down, you'll see all these other people promoting, oh, you're losing money in the market. It's risky. You can lose your money. You don't want to lose your money, right? You worked really hard for this. You should invest in these safe options over here, these safe, whatever else. You should, put some gold under your mattress and buy a whole life policy and like all these other things.
Yep.
And it's not, though. And so one thing that's where we spend a lot of time, is trying to change people's, again, not just their knowledge, but their beliefs about investing. And I think one of the most powerful things that we've found is just reframing the way that we think about investing in the stock market. Because I think when we think of stock market, right, it's like this nebula for a lot of people, people who really studied it and who really know it, maybe with business backgrounds and those kind of things. Like, maybe we understand it better. But for most people, when they think of the stock market, they think of a bunch of dudes in suits, like screaming buy and sell and waving tickets on the New York Stock Exchange floor. And they think of, the Great Recession and the big financial crisis and 2001 and all these different things. And so it conjures up all these, like, and you're investing in the stock market. Like, what is that even? That doesn't mean anything to most people. And so we try to reframe the way that people think about this, even by what we call it. So whenever I'm talking to clients or on my podcast or those kind of things, I always talk about it as investing not in the stock market, but investing in equities. And they mean the same thing. Equity and stock, it means the same thing, but it means ownership in these businesses. And I think people get the term equity more because if you buy in a house, or you want to buy a house, or you have already bought a house, most people, they can't just buy a house flat out. And so they get a mortgage, right? And they put some money down and they're paying off that mortgage. And as they pay down that mortgage, their equity or their ownership in that house grows, right? And eventually you reach 100% equity. You 100% own the house. The bank doesn't own anything. You own it outright. And so that's what I think a lot of people think when they think of equity. In the same way, most of us can't just go out and buy a business, especially not a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar business. So we buy into this, and we buy equity, or we buy ownership of the best businesses in the world. So in my language, we don't invest in the stock market. We are co-owners of the best businesses in the world. And when they do well, we do well, right? You may, like, some of these listeners and stuff may know like local people who own businesses. And sometimes those businesses are doing really well, and sometimes they're going through some harder times, and then you lay some people off or do some things, but those businesses endure. And most of the people that we know that are really wealthy locally and abroad are people who started or who own really successful businesses, right? And so if we want to build wealth, then we want to be the owners of these really good companies, not loaners to these companies. Because when you buy bonds or you buy CDs or you buy these other things that are safe, you are loaning to these companies. You're taking your money, loaning it to them. They're paying you interest on that. And then they're taking that money, right? They're not making less than what you're loaning it to them for. Otherwise, they wouldn't take the loan. They're taking that money and they're going out and they're reinvesting it. They're developing their services and their products, and they're making a ton of money on it. And all that money goes back to the owners of that business. So when you're a co-owner of the best business in the world, you don't invest in the stock market. Instead, you own these companies. When they make money, when they make profits, they pay that to you in dividends. You can take that money or you can reinvest it and own more businesses, which is a good thing to do, right? And sometimes these businesses do really well and their values go way up. And sometimes they do run through some rough times and the value temporarily declines, right? So again, people talk about how, oh, I lost money in the stock market. Only if you sold. Because instead of, if you're a business owner, you don't usually see local business owners, as soon as they go through a rough time, sell their businesses immediately. They stay on. They're the owner. They're the manager. They keep running them, and they're going to keep doing things to be better. And so we don't lose money. Instead, we have a temporary decline in value. So that's what happens with businesses. Sometimes they're worth a little bit less, and then other times they're worth a lot more. But if just changing that perspective, changing the way we think about investing, and realizing that sometimes they do really well, sometimes they temporarily down, but that the advance is permanent, and you can just be an owner. You don't even have to manage the business, right? Someone owns Owens Corning. I don't know if is it privately held or is it a public company? I'm not even sure.
Uh, oh, it's
I don't
public.
even.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
public.
yeah, I think so.
I'm
Right. So a
not
whole bunch
sure.
of people own that, and when they make money, they pay out those profits, and they can enjoy that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so changing that thing, I think, and then that mindset helps people to stay invested, helps people when the market declines to be like, it's all right, it's coming back. We know it's coming back. We just don't know when it's coming back, right? Helps them put more money in there and not be afraid of it. And so instead of putting money in gold or CDs that are making maybe 4 or 5%, they're becoming co-owners of good businesses that average, in that 10% range. And the difference between 5 and 10% over 30 years is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, right, just that myth always comes up that investing is dangerous or it's risky, and so you should make sure that you diversify into these other things and not put all your eggs in one basket. And but if it's the best basket, then all your eggs should be in there because that's where you're going to make the most money.
Yeah, and I do see a lot of people, they wonder about these things. They wonder about, is that money worth it to put into this, or is it worth it to just, stay out of it for now and get into it later? And that's something that, it's risky to think about it, but it's almost not risky to just make a decision, because
Right.
as long as you're making a decision, like, you can learn from that. If you don't make
Yep.
any decision, then you're not gonna, you don't know what happened. You'll
Yep.
you'll
Yep.
never know what that decision would have helped you with. So then
Yep.
later on down the road, you're going to be wondering the same thing because you didn't do anything about it earlier. It would never hurt. Like, if there was a stock that you wanted to, like, a company goes public, and they have their IPO, and then you buy like one share, it's not going to hurt you because then you could at least see what it's going to do. But if you do nothing because you think it's too risky, you're not going to
Yep.
learn anything from that.
Yep. And that's the thing too, is like and that, so like now we have, right, as we're recording this, I don't know what the delay is between recording and airing these, but as we're recording this, right, the market's doing well. It's kind of pushing all-time highs. But people, so now you're hearing all this talk about like, well, but it's an election year, so is the market going to tank? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a good time to be in it. Should we pull money out? Should we put it in safer vehicles and all that stuff? Um, and so they're always afraid of, well, hey, I thought, investing is supposed to be buying low and selling high. And so if it's high right now, then should we not be buying because maybe it's going to crash again and all those things. Um, and so I just, maybe think about it this way, right? If I said, hey, back in February, so it's February 12th when we're recording this. In February 12th of 2020, let's say I give you a choice of, hey, you can invest in this in businesses, you can buy equities, you can become an investor in the S&P 500, or you can put your money in CDs. And back in 2020, I said, hey, and by the way, over the next 4 years, we're gonna have a global pandemic. And when that strikes, right, the value of the best business in the world is going to drop by a third in 33 days, right? 35% down in 33 days. It's going to be the fastest drop in history, right? And that's going to happen in like a month. And so if you invest now, you're investing at the very top of the market before the fastest drop in all of investing history, right? So we're going to have this global pandemic. Then Russia is going to invade Ukraine and start wars over there. Gaza is going to attack Israel and start some wars over there. We're going to see inflation it's going to be the highest we've seen in 40 years. And there's all these things. And then in 4 years, right, you can either be invested in the market through all that, invested in businesses, or you can keep your money in some CDs that were at the time paying out 2% per year at that time. Which would you choose? And most people, given that scenario, right, if someone actually had that crystal ball back in February of 2020, would have said, well, let's invest in the safe stuff, right? Let's put it in CDs, let's put it in gold, let's put it in something else. Like if all that stuff's gonna happen, there's no way that the market's gonna be up over that time. And I don't remember the numbers. I should have looked this up. I didn't know I was going to tell the story, right? But I'm pretty sure the S&P 500 was like 3,500 or 3,400 or something right before COVID hit, and now it's 5,000. And so over the last 4 years, it's up something like 8 or 9% per year over that time, up over 40%, something like that. I should have looked up the numbers exactly. You can look it up, right? But over all that time, the market's still way up. And if you invested in anything else, there's no other mainstream investment you could have had that has done as well over that time, even though we've gone through 2 bear markets, global pandemics, all these things. And so that just goes to show, like, we don't always know. There's not always a direct correlation between what's happening and what the market's going to do in response to that. And so we always talk about, well, hey, if you're worried about investing, the best time to invest is when you have the money. And the best time to pull out of the market is when you need the money to actually live on. And it's just as simple as that, right? The market's up 75% of the time, year over year. And if you over like 10-year periods, it's up like 95 or 97% of the time. And so you have even year over year, any given year, you have a 3 in 4 chance of making money in the market and a 1 in 4 chance of losing it. And so the odds are always in your favor that you will make money by investing. And so continually just choosing to do that, continually investing no matter what's happening, always funding your 401k, funding your Roth IRAs, doing some of these disciplines, regardless of what's happening, is going to be your best way to grow that wealth. Because most people, if they're trying to time it or trying to, you think this or that's going to happen, just when you think the market's going to go down, it just shoots up and you'll never see those prices again. So if you have the money to invest and you're trying to save it, it's a great time, always.
Yeah, and I would like to ask you like about basically when you're helping people, with their finances, what is some things that it seems like people are usually, I guess, they get cold feet or scared to do that you're advising them to do, because I think it kind of helps people to know, or get reassured at why those are not realistic fears in the financial space.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, right? Actually investing in the market. And I tend to work with people closer to retirement, kind of 50 plus, because that's when they've got the most going on. They're transitioning from earning their whole life to now I got to live off that money. And so it's a much bigger fear for them. And so just helping people develop that mindset, understand what's really happening. And then of course we don't, so if you're close to retirement, we don't have 100% of your money invested in businesses, because businesses, the values do go down. And if we need that money and we're forced to sell that, because again, the best time to take money out of the market is when you need it to live on. Well, if you need a bunch to live on because you're now retired and the market's down 30-40%, you now have to sell when it's down, right? And selling when the values of your businesses are down, selling when the market's down, is the only way to turn that temporary decline into a permanent loss. And so if you need to pull money out, if you're getting close to retirement, you're going to have to actually pull some out. We always make sure that you have a separate pile of money set aside in other investments that are not going up and down with the market. And that way, when the market's down, we pull out of there. When the market's up, we pull out of the market. And that way, we never have to sell. when it's down. But when we're younger, I think there's a lot of other things too that people um, just don't want to do. Some of it is like around taxes, right? We always want to pay the least amount of taxes. It seems like we go to whatever's going to be the cheapest, whatever's going to be the cheapest tax filing option, and or whatever's going to give us the biggest refund. Seems like what most people care about, right? And we put all of our attention on, well, how do we pay the least amount of taxes last year
Mm.
or last year, right? And we're right in the middle of a tax season right now. But I'm way more concerned with how do you pay the least amount of taxes over your lifetime,
Mm.
right? We have to pay taxes. For a lot of us, taxes are the largest expense that we're going to pay over our lifetime, right? It's usually not even our house. That's what most people think, like, oh, largest expense, go. And like, oh, probably my house. Yeah, except for you'll eventually pay that off and it will be yours. And if you pay that off by retirement, then you live in another 20 or 30 years without that expense at all. But you will still pay taxes for your whole life, right?
Yeah.
So it's the largest lifetime expense that you have. And so we should be way more concerned with minimizing that expense for decades rather than just focusing on 1 year, right? Because we'll pay the IRS every dime we owe them, but let's not leave them a tip along the way. And so we'll do what we call tax planning, right? Which is we do tax prep too, but we're also looking and say, hey, instead of putting money in your IRA or instead of putting money in your traditional 401k, let's switch that to Roth. You'll pay more taxes now, but you'll end up paying far less over your lifetime. All right. Or let's do this Roth conversion where we take a huge chunk out of your IRA and move it into your Roth IRA. And you're going to have to write a check to the IRS for $5,000 this year. And that's going to bite. Right. And that doesn't feel fun because it's just $5,000 that you just don't have anymore. And you don't feel like you got anything for that. But in the long run, you're going to pay $100,000 less in taxes. Right. And so it's better overall, even though it hurts right now. And so just some of those kind of things, they're not maybe fun decisions to make. They're not fun things to do, or getting, if you got kids and stuff like that, getting your will and, power of attorneys and some of those estate planning things. Again, not necessarily fun conversations to have, but you feel really good when they're done. And when you see the results of that and kind of know how much better off you're going to be after making some of those tough decisions and actually doing the work, most people just feel really good about their overall finances and know that they're going to be much better off having done that.
What are some bad decisions that you've made that looking back on, you're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that?
Yeah. So like, again, early on, we joined a life insurance company, was the mothership of the firm that we worked with. And so again, they had these things. And so at first, like my earliest exposure to personal finance was Dave Ramsey and his book, like The Total Money Makeover, and the podcast and all that stuff. Right. And he talks about, whole life is the payday lender of the middle class, and it's a horrible investment, and all this stuff. But he has a couple of lines that he throws out there about them, but doesn't really explain how it's actually bad.
Mm.
And so like I kind of came in like not thinking they were great products. But then they put a lot of time and money into training you why like Whole Life, for example, is a really good product and how everyone should own it no matter what. And so you have like a few quips from like Dave Ramsey about how it's bad versus hours and hours of training about how it's great. And so naturally you're going to start believing that it is a good product and that a lot of people should have it. And so early on in my career, I ended up drinking the Kool-Aid for a little bit. Sold it to a bunch of people. People had put a bunch of money into these products. And then over time, as I just learned more and more and got training outside of my firm, right, went out and found independent sources, not people who were just trying to train me to sell their products. Just realized how what a bad investment this is. Unless you're super wealthy and have already maxed out everything else, you shouldn't be messing with that. You shouldn't be playing with that. The average person like you or me, and probably a lot of the people listening to this, don't have enough money that a whole life or a universal life or any of these permanent life insurance products makes sense. And so I realized that, kind of the real math behind that. And I went back to all those clients and said, hey, this is what I believed at the time, right? Here are my reasons, right? We went through that. You were convinced we were both convinced this was a good product. This is what I know now. We can keep it. Here's the pros and cons of keeping it. We can cancel it. Here's the pros and cons of canceling it. If we cancel it, you're basically out all that money you put into it, right? And so people are out thousands of dollars because if you cancel it right away, you don't get anything back. But if you hold it for 20 years, you'll get something. So it's tempting, But again, you have to look at, well, what's the opportunity cost? If you keep putting money into this product that's growing at 3%, yeah, you get to keep the $3,000 you've already put in there. But if you just cut all that, just cut your losses, and you took all that money and bought ownership shares in the best business in the world instead, making 10%, you will be way better off in 20 years than now. So again, having those hard conversations, almost just having to apologize to people, honestly, like, sorry, I apologize for my not knowing what I was talking about back then. And most people ended up canceling them. I mean, I kind of gave people some, a couple years of like free financial advice to kind of make up for the money that they're already sunk into those products. But yeah, that's just a big one. You see it a lot, and these companies make a ton of money off of them, so they can afford to spend a lot of money on marketing and training and some of those kind of things. But if you really do the math, they're not great products. And so having come from that world, I spend a considerable amount of my time trying to run across other people who have them, having to explain why they shouldn't have them, cancel it, have them bite the bullet. Which again, not a fun conversation to have, not the things that people like to do to find out that they've put $5,000 into a product, and if they cancel, they're going to get nothing. That's life, I guess, sometimes.
So you were talking about you help a lot of retired people, and you have probably an idea of an idea of an ideal client. What would you say is that perfect kind of client that you would love to work with, and then also what are some types of people that you're like, I will work with them, but this is a nightmare client.
Sure. That's a good question. Yes, I think my ideal client are just like, well, one, good people, because life is too short to work with people that you don't like to be around, right? And I've always had this rule where if I see an email come from somebody, or I see that someone's calling, and I see their name on the phone that they're calling, and I get a like, in my spirit, right? You're just like, you groan because they're trying to contact you. That's a red flag, right? You probably should not be working with that person. And so they got to be good people. But I think my ideal client is just like people who are good people who have been just diligently saving for a while, and they're experts in their field. They're just not experts in finance.
Mm.
But they know that their money could be doing more for them. They're willing to pay for good advice because they know that good advice is worth some multiple of whatever they're paying to get it, right? And they just want someone to help them, guide them, do it for them as much as possible, and so that they can keep focusing on the things that are important to them, their family, finishing off their career, their retirement, hanging out with the grandkids, whatever it may be, along there. So just right, those people who've, I don't work with a whole bunch of super rich people or people that make a ton of money. It's really just average, a lot of average people that just worked average jobs and just saved well, and now they need help dealing with what a lot of times is more money than they ever thought they would have. But again, they made those decisions, right? They took the raises, not the bonuses. They invested a little bit more in their 401k, and now it's a good amount of money. Um, I think the people that are uh, can be frustrating to work with are the people that already think they're experts in their field, and so they think they're experts in all fields,
Mm.
right? Like I'm really smart. I've got a high IQ. Like I know all these things, and I've read 2 books on finance, and I listen to a podcast, so therefore I'm the expert. And they just want to fight with you on every little point, and that's okay. Like you can be that kind of person. Um, it's just not going to be a good fit for us to work together, right? Like I've got other professionals in my life that I go to, and I don't fight with them, right? When my dentist says, "Hey, we should do a crown, otherwise you're gonna lose this tooth," I'm not like, well, here's, I heard this on a podcast and blah blah. I don't fight with them. It's like, okay, schedule the appointment. I don't know, like I don't know anything about teeth. Um, so I think it's why we build a lot of wealth in this society and in first world countries, is because we have people who specialize. And
Mm.
when you have people who specialize and get really good at one thing and then help each other out, right? So I'm helping dentists and dentists are helping me. And I might cut my own grass because I enjoy the exercise, right? And I might shovel in the winter because it's a good workout, and there's no point in going to the gym to work out and then using the snowblower to like get rid of the snow. But I'm not gonna like try to do my own LASIK surgery
Mm.
or perform an appendectomy or um, create legal documents or like any of these other kind of things, right? And so working with people to do that and not trying to be an expert in all fields, but being really good at your career, what you're good at, and then assembling a team around you to help you with all the other things. I think that's what really gets people farther ahead in life. So I like being a part of those circles. And when you have the certain people that are kind of know it all and think that just because they're an expert here, therefore they're an expert in everything, those are more frustrating to work with.
So I do work in the music business, and I do everything from like rapping and doing
Hmm.
audio engineering, making beats, all that kind of stuff. And God, there's so many since I do all of that stuff, sometimes I think people forget that I know that stuff. And so like
Hmm.
when I'm helping them make a song, they'll be like trying to tell me, what to do, and I'm just like, I know what what should be
What I'm talking
done.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
Right.
think a lot of times, a lot of people, they when they're working with somebody else on a project, they have in
Hmm.
their head like, this is what I want. Nobody can tell me, elsewise. And it's like the person you're working with, there's a reason why you're working with them. Is because you couldn't get this done yourself. You need the
Yep.
assistance. So just
Yep.
listen to what they're talking.
Yep. Yep. And like that's another good example. Like I don't know anything about music. I'm not musically inclined. I don't know the first thing about any of that stuff, right? So like I didn't try to compose my own intro music to my podcast. You hire that out. You get someone else to do that, right? And I think yeah, yeah. So that's a great point. I think you get a lot of that of people who have an idea what they want. They've read a few books that are very convincing or do a few things that they think are, right. So they just have it embedded in their mind that the stock market is risky or that gold is a great investment and a great hedge against inflation or whatever, because they saw Tom Selleck talk about it and he's got a great mustache. And so therefore he must be believable. Um, yeah, so that's a good point. I don't know if I had considered that.
Do you ever have? I see these like memes and stuff online where people are like, it'll be like a high dollar client. They'll once you finish helping them, they're just like, awesome, thanks. And then like the low dollar client, it's like, well, I was really wanting this. Can you change this and do that? And they have all these expectations. Do you see that like people who make more money are just more likely to just trust you and just go along with it, and people who don't have as much are more likely to question things that you're doing?
Yeah, I, it's not like a hard, it's not a mile difference. I think there's also just like personality types, some that have a lot of money, some which have none or very little that are also like that. So you can find some difficult clients maybe on both sides. But yeah, in general, it kind of feels like the people that have saved well, have a bunch of money, like they'll just right. You give them advice, you give them planning, you show them why we're doing all this stuff too, right? You prove it with math and all this stuff. And again, like we're a we're what's called a fee only advisor. So like they're paying us a fee. We don't get paid any more to recommend this product over this product or this strategy over this strategy. We get no commissions, no kickbacks. So they know all that. And so they know there's no like, hey, for good advice, here's your good advice, right? And so they're writing it all down. They go do it right away. They do all this stuff. And then you have other people that a lot of times, yeah, don't have as much and they're questioning everything you're telling them, or they just don't do it, or they're always trying to come up with an alternative. Like I'm like, no, we gave you our best. Plan A is the best plan. There's no reason to explore. Like we've already explored all these things, and I don't need to explore them again for you personally because I've already explored them for a dozen other clients before, and the result is always the same. We should just do this, and maybe it's a reflection overall, right, of people who do know that we are better off collaborating as experts in all kinds of fields to be better off than people who are trying to DIY everything. And
Mm.
they're very afraid to pay anybody any money for anything. And so they're always trying to figure out ways to get it cheaper or do it themselves or those kind of things. And so maybe these people, that's why they've saved well. That's why they have more money because they're used to delegating, used to involving other people. And so they just take the experts at their word and just go. And other people are gonna challenge everything on that. And even me, right? Like I'm a I don't pay for financial advice because I can do that for myself, right? But I still, I pay for like I have a performance coach. And so I pay hundreds of dollars a month to have weekly meetings with someone who's just challenging me on my beliefs, challenging me on my actions, making sure that I'm doing the things that I say are most important to me. Some of those other kind of things. And so I'm not trying to save the most money. I'm not trying to optimize for doing that. I'm trying to optimize for how do I get better. This person is better at coaching than I am, and so I want to dig into that. And I think it's if you look at like professional athletes, and probably you can tell me if this applies to musicians or not, because again, I don't know anything about the music industry, but it seems like it isn't amateur athletes that have a coach; it's the professional ones,
Yeah.
right? It's the people who are already really good at what they're doing that seek additional advice, additional support, additional guidance, so that they can get to that next level,
Yeah.
right? So people who are already really good with their finances, they're actually more likely to go out and get a coach, get a financial advisor, get a financial planner to take them to that next level than people who don't have any, who are always trying to do it on the cheap or never pay anybody anything. And it seems like great musicians, the great other things, like also work with record labels and all these other things to collaborate and get better. I'm totally talking out of something I don't know at all. Maybe you can correct me that that's the same in other fields too, but definitely right in the professional athletics, that's who has the coaches. That's who wants to get better. The people who are already really good and want to just take it to that next level.
No, you're 100% right. And that also goes back to what you were talking about earlier with people not knowing, like, what to invest in, and then like thinking stocks are risky. Like, if you if you're not investing into your career, as we were talking about, like if
Mm.
you're in the little leagues of the music industry, then, or if you're not doing really well, then you're probably not investing in your career. Like if you're not making
Mm.
a lot of money, you don't see the benefit of investing the money because you don't believe that it's gonna work out. But
Yep.
if you're already, having sellout shows and selling hundreds of thousands of CDs, then you're like, oh, it's worth it to invest and, get somebody to help me out and all that kind of stuff. But
Yep.
you're completely right with the same thing. Like people who don't have that much money, they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I should invest that because I need my money to do this, and I got this trip I want to go on and all this kind of stuff, so I need to keep my money." But like somebody who has a bunch of money, they're more likely to be like, "Well, I can see how this will make me more money, and I'm willing to save and wait for that money to come along
Yep.
in the future." So yeah, there's
Absolutely.
a lot of similarities right there.
Yep. I think too, some people they're scared of, and there's a non-trivial amount of people out there who have had bad experiences with the pros, right? Bad experiences with coaching or with financial advisors or those kind of things. And they met with someone because they wanted that extra advice. They didn't know the differences between different financial advisors and planners and all that stuff out there. And so they worked with someone who seemed like they were independent, but in the end they just kept pressuring them to buy whole life insurance or buy this annuity or do this, that, and the other thing. And they just, like, some people they have a gritty feeling after working with them, and they're constantly feel like they're being sold and all that stuff. And so then they take it back over themselves because they're kind of sick of doing that, or they start ignoring their advisors' calls and those kind of things because they don't like dealing with it, and they don't know that there's any other way, right? And so that's one of the other things that I try. And like, again, I'm only trying to work with like 100 households and then I'm done, right? Like, 'cause I'm trying to do a really good job for like a few families, and so I can't possibly work with everyone, right? There's
Mm.
way more people that want advice and that need advice than I could possibly work for. So this is not a me trying to get more clients, but just in general, just trying to raise awareness, because I didn't even know this stuff until I was several years into the industry. And if you can be in the industry and not know the differences, like, what hope do the normal people that are not in the industry have of doing that? And that is that there are kind of commission based advisors, and then there are fee only advisors, and one of them is incentivized to sell certain products because that's where they make the most money. Doesn't mean they're not good people. Doesn't mean they're not going to have some really good advice. Doesn't mean that they're going to force products onto people that don't need them. It's just that there's a huge incentive to do that. And
Mm.
then there are other people who only get paid by the client to not recommend anything else other than what's the best for the client. Um, and those are going to cost more up front, right? They're usually going to charge you some fee, where these people here might work for free, but we know nobody works for free, right? And so if you're never seen an invoice, if you're never seen a bill, if you're never seen, like, this is what it costs to work with this advisor, they're not working for free. And so they're selling you something that is giving them a big payday on the back end. And I just think people should just know the difference, right? And should just know what they're paying their advisor, what their advisor is earning from them, and what those conflicts of interest are. And even if you accept that and you're like, okay, yep, he's making commissions off me. I still really want this product. I still really like the idea of having life insurance. I still whatever else. That's fine as long as you know, right? And so I'm just trying to, one of the things I like to do is just raise awareness of that. And if people want someone who is only going to be giving them advice and planning and not trying to sell them anything, the best place I always tell them to go is feeonlynetwork.com, because everybody on there, they're all know what they're doing, and they're all only get paid by the clients themselves, and they make no kickbacks, no commissions, no anything. And so that's a good place for people to start if they want to learn more or know more. Because again, I can't help everybody, and so there's a lot of other really good advisors out there who are doing it the right way. Um, that are happy to help. So if you are kind of like, hey, you know what, I want to take my finances to the next level. I want to find someone that specializes in working with people in my situations, maybe local, maybe online. I want to get that coach. Then that's probably the first place I would go to look for one.
Well, Freeman, it's been phenomenal talking to you. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. If you could just give everybody like your info or websites, anything that you got for everybody.
Yeah, I think probably the best place to find me would be on I have my main financial planning firm, but then I also have like this educational brand called Retire Mentorship. It's retirement and mentorship, slapped together there. RetireMentorship.com. That's where we have our podcasts. We send out weekly emails, a quarterly magazine. We've got some workshops on there. I wrote a book a while back, and so you can get that for free on there, or you can buy it on Amazon, but you might as well get it for free if you can. And so that's the best place to kind of find my work. And if any of this sounds interesting or people want to be like, that makes sense to like have good money mindsets and to have these good beliefs that are encouraging us to keep doing the right things instead of kind of falling into these myths or whatever, then that's a great place to, all the content we put out on there is trying to just build that belief in great investing and great financial planning and great those kind of things. It's not jargon. It's not talking about alphas and betas and some of these other boring things about the markets. And so all that's just designed to increase your knowledge and your belief and actually inspire you to act and do the things that you know you need to do.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for spreading your knowledge and wisdom that you have about financial planning, and hopefully that this will help anybody who watches this get their finances in order and make sure that they're prepared for anything that they have in life. So, again, thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.